Congressman King.
Present. Oh, I'm muted.
Chambers is muted.
Congressman Keene is present.
Congressman Big Horse.
Present.
Congressman Walker.
Here.
Congresswoman Shaw.
Present.
Congresswoman Lemon.
Present.
Congresswoman Rebar.
Present. Next item on our agenda is prayer trade. Would you like to render us a prayer this afternoon?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for all the many blessings you bestow upon the Osage Nation and this Osage Nation Congress. Please give them the strength that they need to make good decisions for the benefit of the Osage people. Thank you, Lord, for this wonderful rain that we're enjoying today. And thank you for everything that you give us and all the sins that you forgive. We ask all these things in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Trey.
Yeah.
The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes, and those were attached to your agenda invite or your meeting invite dated September 18th.
Chairwoman.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I was kind of scrambling to find the minutes. Which minutes are we reviewing here? Look here.
Should be dated September 18.
Gotcha. That's what I thought. You are listed as a congressman in roll call.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that, clerk.
It's all right. She did it to me as well. That's hold it against her forever. Motion to approve the amended minutes, September 18th.
Second.
Is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
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 All right, thank you. The next item on our agenda is ONCA 20-82, an act to authorize the IDC department and Tribal Works, and the sponsor is Congressman Walker.
All right. Thank you, Chairwoman. Committee. Got the bill in front of you in your packet, so to speak. Electronic packet. Anyway, this is just that. It is an authorization of IDC and the authorization to expend the monies appropriated in the budget. The IDC amounts are listed in the overarching appropriation bill, but I believe and I agree with the notion that these monies need to be authorized through legislation. But this isn't necessarily an appropriation bill, it's an authorization to spend. So that's really all I've got for opening remarks regarding the bill.
Okay, thank you, Congressman Walker. Does the committee have any questions on the actual bill? If not, I'll lead with a comment. I believe that I wouldn't recommend that we actually take any action today. If the committee agrees, I think tomorrow we're going to be visiting again about the IDC as it relates to the professional fees. I think we were in good discussion with the comptroller and her consultant on September 18th. And I think that as the Congressman Walker stated, all of these IDC costs are within the budgets and the big bill and the other bills as they relate to appropriations. And if we make any changes to those bills, then this bill would have to be amended as well.
Chairwoman.
Yes, sir.
Well, I really, I guess I could have paused another second or two. Is there anybody that has any questions or comments before I use that as a segue into another discussion? Take that as a no, Chairwoman. Would you agree?
I would agree, sir.
All right. So, you know, we've called an emergency meeting here. We are basically, I want to say running out of time, but the clock is ticking, and we need to make a decision on how we're going to handle IDC. So, Chairwoman, if you want to utilize this bill as an opportunity to hear from others and maybe discuss the issues, I think it would be worthwhile.
Yes, thank you. I'd agree.
Okay, so, well, like I said in my opening remarks, you know, this bill matches the IDC amounts in the other appropriation bills for, you know, the big bill, and also our budget, judicial, maybe one or two others that is applying IDC to professional fees. I'm interested to hear from others on how they feel about it. I've expressed myself, at least I feel like I have, that I don't necessarily agree with that right now. I felt like it's been, and I hate to overemphasize or over-exaggerate terms, but I feel like that's kind of been thrust upon us during this session unexpectedly, and it's a significant amount. And I appreciated the engagement from the consultant, Controller Fox, even Treasurer Littleton, on the reasons or the benefits as to why. I still have some questions. It's my understanding, regardless of whether or not we do it to tribal funds, it's still going to be done to federal funds, which that's fine and dandy, I think, which that's not necessarily something that we have control of, but that's a big decision that's going to have to be made, and I feel like it needs to be made quickly. So I'm prepared, and I've spoken with Chairwoman Rebart about this, and I think she feels the same way, that we are of the mindset, let's back those IDC charges out of the professional fees or not administrative cost line items and come forward with a committee substitute. And, you know, I don't want to say the most compelling reason, but a very compelling reason also to do that is what we've heard from our Supreme Court Justice, Mr. Rent. Kind of difficult to have your Supreme Court Justice tell you that it's against the law and then just go ahead and do it anyway. So I'm anxious to hear from others. I'll be quiet for a minute. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Congressman Walker. I just wanted the committee to know, and the other members listening, that the clerk has sent out an IDC report that the budget analyst has prepared. If you'd like to pull that up and kind of go through it, he does a great job talking about the 2021 indirect cost as it relates to the professional fees. And I could give you a moment to read through that so that you can have some questions. But I agree with Congressman Walker. I think that we need to discuss it so we can prepare. As you know, that's why all these sections will be coming back to appropriations. And as you guys are well aware of, I don't know that there were too many amendments in committee. And we're still waiting on some other appropriation requests from executives, such as the meat processing plant. So I don't know where we're going to be there. Again, we've heard discussions about the rollover. I think Congresswoman Stabler has filed a bill that would stop the rollover. And we heard yesterday that there's a liability there. We've also maybe heard today, that our gaming distribution will stay the same, revisited in January as they do every year. So we have some things to consider. We still have legislation sitting out there that we haven't reviewed that have appropriations within them. So I think Congressman Walker is correct that this is what we need to discuss today so that we know moving forward what we're going to do. So I would ask any of the committee to please start asking any questions.
Chair Rivard.
Yes, Congresswoman Shaw?
Well, I don't necessarily have any new questions outside of the ones that I had in our conversation the other day. I do appreciate the information that was provided to us by the consultant and by the controller. I understand what their rationale is, but I also agree that, that the issue that has been raised needs to be cleared up before I feel comfortable with that at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Congresswoman Shaw. As I understand, and you guys correct me, this is an option that we do through negotiation, and I believe that it's verifiable. I think the question before us is, do we start charging IDC to professional fees now in FY21, or is this something we could talk about in the interim and further discussion and maybe apply that to FY22? Right now, I think, Mr. Frazier, do you want to go over your report right now and just talk about the numbers related to that, please?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't have that email. Or if I do,
Let's see, Shanna or the clerk, I'm sorry, just sent that to us at 3:55.
Okay, let me look.
I don't have it
Thank-
either.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Clerk, can you hear them and maybe you want to resend that to them?
She's resending it now. I think there might have been a technical problem. We apologize.
Thank you, guys.
Got it at 3:55 as well.
Okay. Jordan, do you want to just go ahead and at least start talking about the report?
Yes, ma'am. So in ONCA 2076, there are 22 tribal programs that budget for professional fees. Combined, that's a total of $3,199,133 of the total tribal appropriation for ONCA 2076. It's going toward professional fees. If an IDC rate of 20.2% is charged on those fees, it accounts for $646,225 to the IDC pool. So that's how much extra in IDC you're going to be paying on those executive branch budgets if you start charging IDC to professional fees. For the judicial branch budget, you're going to be paying an extra $37,913. And for the legislative branch budget, it's going to be an extra $44,076 to IDC. So, in short, if Congress enacts a policy change allowing IDC to be charged on professional fees, the three branch appropriations would contribute an extra $690,301 to the IDC pool in fiscal year 2021. Additionally, the Minerals Council is requesting an extra $1 million appropriation. And so if you're charging 20.2% on those professional fees, that $1 million in professional fees, that's going to be $202,000 extra that you're going to have to appropriate to cover that IDC. The second part of that report you got goes over the needs of the IDC funded programs in the Osage Nation. The most recent complete fiscal year we have is fiscal year 2019, so I talk about that in the report. In fiscal year 2019, Congress authorized, $8,135,436 and to those IDC programs, and those programs only utilized $7,010,000. About $7,010,000. So they left over $1.1 million unspent. That's about 14% of what they were authorized for. Now, since then, 2 more programs have been added to the IDC pool. Those are archives and emergency management, but combined their budgets are about $500,000. So even if those 2 programs had been included in fiscal year 2019, and if they had maxed out their budgets, then there still would have been about 8% of what was authorized left over. So frankly, it appears that the request to begin charging professional fees to IDC IDC to professional fees is not something they're requesting out of necessity. It's something Congress would have to do as a matter of preference. They don't, in my opinion, at least if it's anything like 2019, fiscal year 2019, they don't really need the extra funding. However, I think their concern is they don't want to leave the federal monies that they could be collecting on the table. And I certainly understand that and think think that's a valid point. But again, I think under the current policies, they are receiving sufficient funding for their programs.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. Does the committee have any questions?
Yeah, Chair Revard.
Madam,
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Keene.
What is the negative repercussions for charging IDC on the professional fees? Jordan, if you could answer, please.
Either you have to increase your appropriations, or that money has to be pulled from other parts of the budget to cover those charges. That's for the tribal budgets. On the federal budgets, I think you just can draw down more money. But on the tribal budgets, that's not the case. You have to appropriate more or pull from other parts of the budget to cover that additional cost.
Thank you, sir.
Can we stay on that topic for just a minute, Chairwoman?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Walker.
So IDC is one of those things that you just can't really reach out, grab a hold of, and say, well, this is the hows and the whys. It's such a elusive answer, questions like that. One person might say, and this would be from somebody that's maybe not overly familiar with it, but there's an assumption that the higher the rate that you charge, then that's going to lessen your negotiation posturing down the road. So the more you charge, the weaker position you are when it comes to negotiating a good rate for the nation in the future. And I'm not saying that as a matter of fact. That's just been an assumption that I've always felt like the nation, those that worked with it, whenever I was an employee and a director, hearing and listening to the discussions about IDC, feel like that's been an assumption that the members of Congress have had and held since I've been on Congress. So is that a negative consequence? I would say yes, there's an assumption that there is. I will also say I'm glad that the Treasury Department has Tasha working with a professional, a consultant. I've wondered before, is there a professional IDC person out there that can answer a lot of these questions that never seem to be answered? And I wonder, why you see this trend over the last really 15 or 20 years where the IDC rate just continues to creep up. It's remained relatively stable over the last few years, but heck, it seems like whenever I was first a director back in 2002 and 3, I want to say the IDC rate was like 13 or 14%. Well, is that good or bad? Honestly, I really don't know. IDC is, it clearly provides administrative costs for the nation, or supplement administrative costs that are burdened because of the programs that those departments administer. If you were to answer it from a simple taxpayer's perspective, and I mean, a taxpayer might say, well, I feel like these departments, particularly speaking of federal programs, these monies are provided to tribal nations to provide services for those in need. Does applying a higher IDC amount provide more services or less? I think that's an easy answer. So I only say that because I believe we're in these seats to be good stewards of the monies that we are elected to oversee. And the federal budget, maybe we don't appropriate those funds and really don't have control over how the IDC amount is applied right now, but it's something that needs to be discussed, and it's something that I feel like we should be a part of the discussion. Anyway, not trying to get all righteous or anything. I just felt like I wanted to get some of those things off of my chest and anyway, participate that much in that way right now in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Walker. Are there any other questions from the committee?
Madam Chair.
Is that Mr. Potts?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Congressman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jordan, I just had a quick question, and maybe it gets to potentially the need to charge professional fees. IDC, I see in your memo that you've got a surplus that I think you said we don't have the necessity to charge. Where we collected at 8.1 million and we only utilized 7 million. Those IDC funds are only captured if the administrative expenses are spent from those budgets. So I'm wondering if you have been able to, carry on a conversation with Controller Fox to determine if perhaps we're not spending administrative expenses at a rate to keep up with the demand of the IDC pool. Or if potentially we only spent 7 million because that's all we were able to collect based on the expenditures from the administrative expenses. And perhaps we spend, professional fees at a higher rate or just more thoroughly throughout the fiscal year. So by charging indirect costs to professional fees, perhaps that provides a more steady or more solvent backing to the IDC funds. So have you been able to have that conversation? Is that a concern that may be there? Whereas we're not necessarily getting the shortfall there. It's the collection of the IDC funds is what we're worried about.
Controller Fox was kind enough to sit down with me and discuss the reasons why they wanted to begin charging it to professional fees. And she did mention the issues you brought up. I did not write this report in a way that reflects the question you brought up, so I can look into that more and get back with you on that. But at this time, I don't have a great answer to your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Potts. Are there any other committee comments or questions?
This is Congressman Keene, Chairwoman Reford.
Go ahead, Congressman.
So I know Treasury's been working on this along with Jordan. Have they made any, obviously we're the ones tasked with passing law, But have they kind of made any recommendation about what they think would be the most fiscally responsible, I guess you could say? Maybe Jordan could answer. Fiscally responsible move.
Go ahead, Jordan.
I know that if you started charging IDC to professional fees, that would cost more in tribal dollars. But I think on the federal side, from the way Controller Fox explained it to me, it would be more fiscally responsible because we would be receiving more federal funds. For example, I believe she said in a previous meeting that they could actually retroactively collect federal funds back to 2017 for services that they provided, administrative services that they provided on federal grants that they were not compensated for initially. So I think, at least on the federal side, it would be more fiscally responsible if you started collecting IDC on professional fees. On the tribal side, I'm not totally sure.
Okay, thank you, and sorry for putting you on the spot like that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Keene. And Jordan, I think Jordan's correct in that the chief, or Tasha sent a letter, to Chief in Congress about the IDC, and she gave a great synopsis. And he's right. They're going back to FY17 and FY through 19. And if you remember, she said they're going to collect $2.4 million from federal agencies. So that'll be available, I believe she said, after the FY audit. But kind of back to what Congressman Walker said, I think it's clear that the higher the rate, then the less services that we're able to provide. A lot of those federal grants have admin caps. And so, which just means that you're only allowed to have a certain amount of admin expenses charged to that fund, or the amount that they appropriate to you through U.S. Congress. This is something that I don't want to say that we won't do, and I understand what Controller Fox was saying was that it's about the amount of time and work it takes to process contracts through procurement. And I understand that it is time consuming and it's allowable. So I think, again, that's discussions we could have during the interim, but right now, I guess I'm saying I wish that we would have discussed this prior to session, so that we knew. I didn't hear it in any of the opening remarks or anything from the treasurer stating, oh, by the way, this is going to drive our tribal appropriation up somewhat. But here we are, so I think the question we needed to decide, like Congressman Walker stated, is do we want to do this now in FY20 or not?
Mrs. Chair, this is Jason Zoll. I have a comment whenever appropriate.
I'll yield.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Zahn.
I just wanted to go back, and I remember when I was budget analyst. So when we came into the administration 6 years ago, we had lowered the IDC rate that was charged in 2015, FY15. Our IDC rate was 23.08. And also, I believe the Attorney General is on the line, wanting to weigh in on the IDC issue as well. Thank you.
Clinton, this is Jody. Is there something you'd like to add?
Yes, I just thought you guys had a question as to whether IDC needed to be changed in the expense category and the definitions of the law. I know there was a comment made by a tribute to Chief Justice Trent that needed to happen. And with all respect to her, Chief Justice, I just don't see it that way. I see it as IDC being applied to another expense category, but I don't see the need to change IDC as an administrative expense in the law.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I want a little bit more clarity from Mr. Patterson on that. So, may I?
Yes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Patterson, you said you don't see. I would almost like you to repeat what you just said, because I thought you said something about changing the law. You know, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm trying to make a determination of what the law actually says now.
Okay, I'll try. I haven't been in on everything, so let me try. And IDC has been in the budget since I think I can remember, and it's always been an administrative expense. The only change here is applying the IDC rate to professional fees, which is classified as a non-administrative expense. But that would not change the character of indirect cost expense, which would mean that you wouldn't need to change the law classifying IDC into a non-administrative expense. It's confusing, I know, but.
Madam Chair, this is Trey.
Go ahead, Trey.
I think I might be able to help clear this up a little bit. From what I gather from what the Chief Justice has said, she's saying that because professional fees are a non-administrative expense, you can't charge IDC to them. And she lists the definition of administrative expenses, which includes IDC. So indirect cost is an administrative expense. But what's missing in the law, what she doesn't say, is that there's no limit in the law as to what IDC can be charged to, what expenses it can be charged to. Osage Nation law does not have any limitation to it. Federal law obviously allows it, as we've heard from the controller. So her suggestion that we needed to move IDC from, or professional fees from non-administrative expenses to administrative expenses in order to charge IDC to professional fees is, well, I just can't see how that would be possible, that would be required. Because like I said, what we're talking about here is indirect cost an administrative expense. We're talking about, can you charge indirect costs to non-administrative expenses? And again, there's nothing in the law that says you cannot charge IDC to non-administrative expenses. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Trey. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, Congressman Walker, would you like to talk any more about your bill or what you think we need to decide on today?
Boy, this is a tough one. I mean, I feel like we've heard compelling reasons why we should go forward like the budgets were sent over by the executive branch. But I'm just not convinced that it's in the best interest of the nation yet. And I'm not saying that, dang it, I hate to be a fence rider right now. I am truly undecided. I'm leaning towards, no, let's not do this year. Hearing from the AG and Trey over the last 5 minutes, it makes me really question the legality of it. I tend to agree with what they've said.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, I would like to hear from somebody else. I've still got trying to rationalize this thing.
Okay, Congressman Potts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I understand, Congressman Walker. I hear what's being said as well. And I spoke to Trey about this as well. I think for me, the deal breaker or the difference is these comments didn't come from a non-authoritative voice within our judiciary. These comments that the law needs to be changed in order for this to happen came directly from the Chief Justice of the Osage Nation Supreme Court. And while I think it's, and all due respect as well, I understand what the Attorney General is saying, I understand what Trey is saying, and I think had those comments been made by a court administrator, a court employee, a explanation of, well, that's not really what the law says, might suffice here to where I'm comfortable with this line. To the contrary, that opinion was stated in a public meeting by our Chief Justice. I happen to agree, and I understand the definitions, and I've read them and worked very closely with them over the years. I'm not willing to go against that right now. I'm open to a change in Osage Nation law, or at least the discussion of such, but at this time, that's not what's before us. So I'm not comfortable going forward until we hear otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Potts. I think that I'm listening as well, and I just think that, again, I think this discussion could happen during the interim, but to talk about what this bill and what, I guess back to what Congressman Walker said, we really need to decide, are we going to adjust our bills to not include IDC on professional fees and have the discussion later? Or are you guys okay with the way they've been submitted? And I think that's what we need to decide, if I'm not mistaken.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So I am, I'm gonna ask a very freshman question here, since this is my first time working on these budgets. So here we are at this point, both compelling arguments. I understand what both the attorneys told us today, but I also have a problem with the fact that, like Congressman Potts said, our Chief Justice had a different evaluation. So how do we get to how do we get to the point where we're going to decide this? Is this something we can decide today? Is it a motion? Is it, I mean, what are the mechanics involved in making that decision?
Madam Chair, this is Trey.
Go ahead.
At this point, this is before the committee. So the committee, has the opportunity to make a decision once the legislation is before you. And so we're talking about the main big bill, ONCA 2076, and then the legislative and judicial branch budgets. You've heard, from the Chief Justice, the Attorney General, and myself. Obviously, you're hearing conflicting opinions. I understand that's confusing and not always helpful. But as members of Congress, you're going to have to make the decision, yes, whether you're going to do that or not. And you'll have to do it on each piece of legislation. And it'll be most likely by motion to either pull out the IDC that is allocated to professional fees, or there will be no motion to make that change. And that will be a decision in and of itself.
Okay, thank you, Trey. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have a couple of little questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Big Horse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This IDC, it changes. How often does it change? Yearly? Annually? Does anyone know?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's annual. I think it's negotiated annually.
Okay, so when you say negotiated, is that with the federal government, or because I thought I was hearing, or I thought I'd heard in a prior meeting that we were switching companies. So are we dealing with the federal government, or are we dealing with a company or companies that sets this IDC?
Oh, thank you, Congressman. Treasurer, would you like to answer, Mr. Big Horse?
Yeah. What we did, we hired a different consulting group to come in and look at what we had done in the past. And this is all a negotiation with the IDC federal agency. So the rate changes every year. And it will change more than likely in the coming year after we submit all the information before. But this consulting company came in and looked what we'd done in the past and said that we weren't maximizing the amount of funds that we were receiving from the federal government. And so they went through every department, did an analysis of how much time was spent by the IDC groups, and came up with this plan. And we thought it benefited the tribe financially. So that's why we suggested it.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions?
Madam Chair, this is Jason. I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Chief of Staff.
I believe I was trying to find the email, but did the Chief Justice did she not suggest that we contact the Attorney General's office to make sure she thought, because she didn't know if the law had changed, did she make that suggestion to contact the AG's office to verify? I can't find the email, but I thought that was in the body of the email.
I don't know. Jason, I can try and look as well.
Madam Chair, this is Brandy.
Go ahead, Congresswoman Lemon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, our second speaker. I don't know what letter you guys are talking about. So I have been having some issues with my email from the letter that Jason was referencing.
Chair, this is Alice.
Go ahead, Alice, or Mrs. Goodfox.
Brandy, that came on Friday.
Okay, let me see what I can do.
And
here.
it says Osage law and indirect costs.
Okay. Do you know about what time, Congresswoman Goodfox?
11:23 a.m.
On Friday. Okay. I overlooked it. Thank you all very much.
Chief of Staff Jason, I do not see where she said that in the email.
No, neither.
It was a different email. I didn't receive this one. Okay, if I find it, I'll share it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, committee, any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, this is Brandy again.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, second speaker. Well, I've intently listened to everything that has been put forth, and everyone's comments and concerns and ambiguity, just like we tend to get to a point. I think sometimes what second speaker said in our last meeting about kind of talking in circles, and so it's kind of where I feel we're at. I'm not complaining, just saying that's kind of where I'm feeling where we're at. And I wanted to give my feelings on, as a committee member of appropriations. And I've heard, what I'm hearing is that there's two sides to this, of course. And then I'm also hearing that maybe working on this in the interim. So, and are we going to do it now? Or are we going to wait to do it? I listened. I believe in subject matter experts, such as the consultant that the Treasury consulted on contract, and was very happy to hear the information that they told us about the abilities to get reimbursements on federal grants and how much money we had left on the table. I've made that comment before in some other meetings, not necessarily congressional meetings, but that was something that was a big quality improvement or quality control that we program line that we did at a prior employment office that I worked at. And I'm not surprised that, when looking into how a program is functioning on efficiency and on return of reimbursement, that you are going to find where we did not utilize the best practice at times. So we learned something and we correct it, and we go down that road of using that best practice. And then hopefully what we do is we continue to stay up on what the best practice is. And so a couple of the meetings that I listened to, like at the Health Authority Board, I've always wondered how much money are they leaving on the table on billing? And I've always wondered, and a lot of times I get some pushback because I think they think that I'm pointing a finger saying you're not doing a good enough job. And it has nothing to do with that, really. It has to do with the fact of what is the best practice and what is the best way, you know, to benefit us in how we're functioning. And so I read the email, and I find it interesting. That's all I'm going to say about that. I hear Trey, I hear our Attorney General, and then, of course, we hear a decision's going to have to be made. So we know it's allowable, of course, on the federal side. And so working in the interim would mean that we would want to possibly change some language in law, or we can just go forth and, you know, do what we're doing as far and accept the extra cost for IDC. So I can hear the possibility of the executive branch telling us that we can't tell them how to operate. We've been down that road before. I mean, we've been down that road with Supreme Court decisions also. So this is all very interesting to me, but we have to make a decision, and I'm okay with it. And I'm okay, and I realize that it's more of an expense to us. And will be the first one to tell you that in the last meeting I talked about, you know, trying to find cuts where we need to make them and things of that nature. But this particular point, I'm ready to move on with this and go forth. And so I'm ready to accept what they have presented to us, and with all the information that we have received today. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Jason. I have a real quick comment to address a statement I made earlier.
Okay, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, it wasn't saying contact the AG's office. It just said if the law has changed and professional fees are now treated as admin expenses, let them know this so they can rebudget. That's what was said. And when I read that, I think about maybe the thought was, I don't want to put thoughts or words in that, but the way I think of it is previous years, and our budget law has since changed, fairly recently, that we would use the above the line, below the line restrictions, and then IDC in our budget template was all the admin expenses. So we put the IDC at the bottom so it's easier to calculate, and then anything that was not considered at that time IDC, then we moved it under non-admin. That may be where that's coming from. But I just wanted to clarify, they did not say go to the AG. They said just let us know if the law had changed and we treat professional fees differently. Sorry, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jason. And I'll ask, okay, a comment and then a question. Right now, from our last report, the executive branch is below their, outlay. But we also know that we've got other appropriations sitting out there. So what we're looking at is, big picture, our total projected revenue right now. Treasurer, what are your thoughts? I mean, you hear our concerns. If we were to reduce the budgets and remove the IDC calculated on professional fees right now and revisit it later, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I'm thinking, though, is that part of our proposal was to use a blended rate or a mixed rate, with the idea being we would charge the federal IDC rate that they give us to non-tribal dollars, and then we would assign what we felt like was more reasonable to the tribal dollars. And and I'm thinking back to a statement that Congressman Walker said about, which is better, a higher rate or a lower rate. And, you always look at IDC as something that you're taking the money out of one pocket and putting it in the other, because you have all the IDC programs that are, you're giving them the ability to spend those dollars that you take from the others. So the other programs. So, and then the other thought, you can make it look like you're spending a lot of money by just keeping that money circulating. So, I don't know what's real. What I do know is our consultants came in and they looked at every department and the things that each department did, and specifically what the IDC departments did for other departments. And, just like you're talking about professional fees, Congress pays professional fees to a individual to give advice, but that individual affects every program in the nation, not just Congress. So, and our AG, he probably deals with multiple departments every day with questions. I know I wore a path to his door, and, his email comes right up on mine first, because I converse with him a lot and get his opinion a lot. And so when you get to looking at how the nation's run, where the dollars come from, how they're spent, it's really complicated. And we just felt like that this consultant gave us a pathway to receive more federal dollars and keep more of our tribal dollars to do other things with. So, that was our motivation. You look at the $2-something million that we can recover from the federal government, that's going to come in handy. And that's going to mean that we can use dollars other places that we have to generate as a tribe. So, I'll yield whatever you guys decide. That's what we'll do. We may not like it. We may come back with you next year and do this same argument. But, right now, you guys make the laws. So with that, I think I've said maybe too much, but thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Treasurer. And, the Treasurer did touch, on the programs, and you'll see in the report that the IDC funds, accounting, archives, communication, compliance. I think new this year is emergency management, some of the executive, our grants department, HR, IT, Office of Strategic Planning, and the operations department. So again, these are considered like admin offices. I think whether we reduce it by 600,000 or not, and depending on the minerals, I don't know that it would affect the operation of those programs, though. Jason, do you want to talk about that?
What was the exact question?
Sorry, the clerk just shredded while I was talking. With the departments that are operated using IDC, if we were to not address this right now, they could still operate properly. Is that correct?
How much money are we talking about total?
It looks to be a little over 646,000.
I mean, whatever's done, we would have to readjust. So,
As I understand too, I think the initial report that was submitted by Kahika in the beginning of the session, it seems like there was a variance. I think, what was it, Jordan, like 9 million? Or how did they say that? Hold on, I'll pull up the report. Like the request and the request of IDC from the programs with regards to the amount needed for the IDC pool, there may have been some leverage there.
Congresswoman,
Go ahead, Mr. Walker.
while you're pulling that report up, what was the scope? I mean, could Treasurer Littleton or Jason, what was the scope that the consultant was hired to do? I mean, what was the task? Can you summarize that in one sentence?
Yeah, I'll try that. We hired them to come in and look at our IDC, what we'd used the same consultant for years, and we hired this group to come in and look and see if we were getting the best deal possible. And in that process, they identified several areas that they felt like we weren't, maximizing what we could get in that negotiated rate. And with that, we expanded to say, well, what do other nations do? How do they do it? And the opportunity to use a blended rate or a rate, segmented rate for different departments came up, and we basically looked at how those different options would affect the nation. And this was the way that we felt like maximized the amount of money that we could receive from the federal government to supplement our tribal funds. So, and they looked at almost every department. They looked at all IDC departments and what they were doing, and then looked at the other departments on how they were utilized.
And thank you for that answer. And dang it, I hate to be this guy, but I mean, you can hire a consultant to ask for whatever, and when you're paying them to do that, they're going to do just that. And I know that sounds disrespectful, and I don't mean it to come across that way, but we've talked about that before, and that doesn't mean that it's right or in the best interest of the Osage Nation, and I'm just not convinced that it's either.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I found the report, and I think the report that we received said IDC that they would collect $9.2 million, and they only budgeted for 8.2. So I'm thinking they would be okay, but I think it's, we've talked about it, and I think we ought to make a decision.
As in a decision, pardon me, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Hello?
As in a decision to move this bill out, postpone this, is that what you're getting at this point? Or the decision on, are we going to charge IDC to professional fees?
It's going to be whether or not we're going to charge IDC to professional fees. This bill, if we have to leave this bill here because we got to wait for the big bills to get here as well.
Oh, okay, so motion to postpone.
Congresswoman, excuse me, Chair.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Speaker.
Mr. Congressman Keene wants to say something, but his mic was dead, so here he comes.
Go ahead, Mr. King.
We've had some good testimony today, but it seems kind of like we're being nudged to kind of charge it to the professional fees. So I only speak for as one member on the committee, but I'm for that. As the treasurer and also Jordan has stated, this would free up some funds for our programs to use more money moving ahead, and I think that's a net positive. Obviously, there's going to be some repercussions, but that's pretty much it. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members?
I have a motion. This is Brandy.
Okay, Brandy.
Thank you. Second speaker, motion to postpone ONCA 2082 to the call of the chair.
Clerk, are you on the line? I don't think so. I don't know that we necessarily have to postpone this
I'm on the
bill.
line. This is the clerk.
Did you hear Congresswoman Lemon's motion?
Yes, ma'am, I did. And her motion is in order, yes. And she feels that this bill needs to be postponed to the call of the chair. That's a motion that would be in order at this time.
Okay. Thank you. So there's been a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say yes.
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 Okay, the motion passes. Any more discussion on whether or not we're going to charge IDC to the professional fees? Or do you guys want to talk about it more tomorrow?
Madam Chair.
Chairwoman.
Go ahead, Mr. Walker.
Yes, I think just a simple discussion regarding IDC on tomorrow's agenda would be worthwhile, and I would like to see the committee tasked on voting whether to do so or not, and then make a recommendation to Congress on doing one or the other.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Walker. I believe that, Clerk, we're going to do the same on the discussion of ONCA 2076. Right now, it's just on our agenda until we get all of the other sections to come out of Congress over to appropriation. So do we need to do anything with that, or can we just leave it?
You can just leave it.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is adjournment.
Chairwoman Revard, I have one more question.
Go ahead, Mr. Keene.
So if we do decide to apply the IDC to professional fees, does that mean we have to go back and actually edit all the budgets that have already come through? Will that affect all of the executive branch budgets then?
Yes, if we decide to remove, it will affect them. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, this is Trey.
Yes,
thank you.
Mr. Gill. Go ahead.
On that point, I just wanted to note that if the Appropriations Committee decides to change the IDC by backing those allocations to professional fees out, then we could do a committee substitute in the Appropriations Committee, and you guys could pass that out of the Appropriations Committee and then send it on to the floor of Congress. So we wouldn't actually have to go in and amend by motion each individual budget, and we certainly wouldn't have the time to send them back to the committees of jurisdiction to have them do it. So it would most likely be done by a committee substitute in the Appropriations Committee, and then Jordan and I would put together the committee substitute, changing all of those numbers and the totals accordingly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gill. Are there any more questions?
Motion to adjourn.
If not,
I have a
Okay.
request, Chair.
Withdraw.
go ahead, speaker.
I was going to ask if we could go ahead and have that committee substitute prepared in the event that that's the decision.
Yes, ma'am.
So I would
It's a
say
heck
let's
of a lot
do
of-
that.
I
Speaker.
think we already have it. We're already working on it, I believe.
Okay, great.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Anybody? Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, guys.